Welcome to lesson 3.7. This time we're going to be dividing a decimal less than 1 by a whole number. So you can see, let's just see what happens when we just take a look at what's going on here. If I take 8 divided by 2, you know that I get 4. But now as the 8 starts to get it less than 1, this becomes 8/10. I still get dividing it by 2, I still get half of it. But I want you to look at something here. I have no leading 0 here, I just have an 8 and a 4, that's okay. But when I go to this one, notice that I've got a 0 here, and I've got a 0 here. Same thing happens here. 2 leading zeros, 2 leading zeros. Now this is all spread back. This is what we're going to learn this lesson. How do you make sure that your decimals are in the proper place and you have the correct number of zeros in front? Because as we have a smaller and smaller dividend here, this here gets smaller and smaller and may have more and more zeros leading the 4. So we should notice that the number of digits here and the number of digits there to the right of the 0 are the same. Okay, and we have to keep track of that, because you can't just change and put zeros in whenever you want. So how does this work? Well, if you take a look at this right here, you'll notice that I've got 2 into 8. That goes 8. It goes 4 times, sorry, which is 8. The decimal's here, and it goes straight up. Whatever you divide the number into, this dividend here, that's what the number above it has to be. So for example, 2 goes into 8 4 times. That 4 has to go above the 8 because that is where we divided it through. Now, you put the decimal up, and whatever comes afterwards, that's going to go up and up and up, and it's going to always line up over the digit that you divide out of. So take a look at an example of how this works. Okay, so my first question is 3 into 0.09. Well, 3 cannot go into 0, right? It's quite simple. You can't make a 3 out of nothing. So what we're going to do is 3 goes into 0 0 times, and that's 3 times 0 being a 0. Now 0 take away 0 is 0. And now you can take this 0 here and you can bring it down, and we now have another 0. All right. Now notice that this 0 comes from this location, so whatever happens here, the number that we're dividing by has got to go above this 0. Our decimal just goes straight up. So how many times can you take 3 and divide it into 0? Well, you can't. You can't make a group of 3 out of nothing. So what we're going to do is say that 3 goes into 0 0 times. And of course, that's nothing. So when you subtract this, you're back to 0 again. So now what we're going to do is we're going to bring down the 9. Now 3 will go into 9 3 times. And that, of course, is a 9, and 9 take away 9 is 0. Notice how everything matches up here, all right? As we tried to put 0, so 3 into 0, it wouldn't go in any time. It wouldn't go in, so it would be 0. We tried it with this one, it was 0. We tried it with this one, of course, it worked. Notice there's a leading 0 here that you have to keep track of. All right? So what's happening over here? You're basically finding out how many times the 3 goes into 9, and you have to keep track of the decimal and all the zeros that are there. Okay? Let's try another one. First off, how many times does 5 go into 0? Well, we know that you can't take 5, so you can't make a 5 out of nothing. And that decimal goes straight up, so now we've got a 0 here. Well, 5 times 0 is 0. When you subtract, you get 0. Now we can bring down this number here, which happens to be a 0. Now, how many times does 5 go into 0? It can't, because you can't make a 5 out of nothing. All right, so that becomes a 0. Of course, 5 times 0 is 0. We can now subtract this, and we get a 0, obviously. And now, finally, I can bring down the 5. All right, and 5 goes into 5 one time, and that's 5. So 5 take away 5 is 0. Okay, notice the lining up of all the decimals and of the zeros over top of them with the zeros, so that we actually make sure that everything matches. Okay, 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 0 is 0, and 5 times 0 is 0, so it actually works out. Let's have you try this one by yourself. Okay, so pause the recording and try this one. All right, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this one because it looks like clicking might become more difficult. All right, so here we go. How many times does 6 go into 0? Well, it can't. So that means it goes into 0 times. And of course, you put the 0 right above this one. And then 0 take away 0 is 0. Now we're going to take and bring this 0 down. And we're going to put the decimal up. How many times does 6 go into 0? It can't. So that means that this is going to become a 0 above this one. All right. Now 0 take away 0 is nothing. And now I can bring down this 0. 6 does not go into this. It goes into 0 times. So put your 0 above this number we brought down. And of course, 0 take away 0 is 0. And now I can bring down the 1. 6 does not go into 1. You cannot make a 6 out of one item. So that means 6 goes in 0 times. Oops, sorry. That should be a 0 here. Okay? 1 take away 0 is 1. And now I can bring down this 2 right here. And that makes 12. Now 6 goes into 12 2 times. That's where that 2 came from. And 12 take away 12 is 0. Okay? So if you take a look here, everything worked out perfectly. I put zeros over everything. They line up perfect. Okay? And you'll notice that, remember, when we're doing multiplication, if you multiply this by their quotient, you should get your dividend. So 6 times this should give you this. So if you got 1, 2, 3, 4 digits to the right of the decimal, this has to have 1, 2, 3, 4 digits to the right of the decimal too. So they should match. Okay? Have you tried this one here? So a mouse eats about 0.63 kilograms of food each week. How much will it eat in one day? So pause the recording and do this question. Okay, let's take a look. Again, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. 7 does not go into 0, so that's a 0. Put a 0 above it. Now 0 take away 0 obviously is 0. And now put the decimal up and bring this 0 down. 7 will not go into 0, so that's a 0. And that's a 0. Notice the decimal goes straight up. 7 goes into 0 0 times. All right? So when you subtract that, you get 0, and now you can bring down 6. All right? Now, 7 will not go into 6 because you need to have 7. So that's another 0. And of course, when you subtract, you get a 6, and now you can bring down the 3. Now, 7 goes into 63. We'll go up here 9 times. And 7 times 9 is 63. So 63 take away 63 being 0. Okay, now check it out. The product here and the product here should equal this. So I've got 1, 2, 3 in this factor. I have 1, 2, 3 in the answer. So the reality is this works. All right, that's a good way to check to make sure things don't get messed up. All right, let's go to the next page. Okay. I suppose it was word problems. I should have this in there, sentences. All right. I want you to take this one and try it. A string is cut in, is 0.045 meters long. If you cut it into 9 equal pieces, how long will each piece be? So what I'd like you to do is to pause the recording and divide this out. 9 will not go into 0. All right, it goes into 0 times, and that becomes a 0, and 0 take away 0 is 0. So now bring down the next 0. 9 will not go into this 0 either. So that's a 0, and of course, the 0 goes up here with your decimal going straight up. 0 take away 0 is 0. Now you can bring down the next digit, which happens to be the 4. 9 will not go into a 4, so that becomes a 0, and that becomes a 0. All right, 4 take away 0 is 4, and then now you can bring down the 5. 9 will go into 45 5 times. 9 times 5 is 45. And of course, 45 take away 45 is 0. So that means that each piece is going to be 0.005 meters long. All right? And now it's time to start your assignment. So if you have any questions, come in and see me. If not, watch the video again, and we'll see you in the next lesson.